Hey everyone, you are listening to another episode of the All Things Private Practice podcast. I'm your host, Patrick.Casale, and I'm joined today by my friend and colleague, Dr. Amy Parks. She is the founder of the Clinical Supervision Directory. She is located in Virginia and a PhD as well. And we're going to talk about all things supervision today, the good, bad, and ugly, and everything in between. So, Amy, I'm really happy to have you on. I'm glad we could finally make this time work and excited to talk about what you've created.
Absolutely. I feel kind of like I'm on like tour because I've been doing a lot of podcasts and I'm really excited to be here with your audience and to be talking to you because it's extra fun to do podcasts with people I know and love and to talk about clinical supervision. I swore I would not be the supervision lady, but I have turned into that. I'm happy to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Sadly, there is some, but also to talk about some exciting things for our field and for our professional colleagues.
Yeah, I think that all sounds great. And yeah, when I think of supervision, I definitely associate your name with that term. So I guess you have become the supervision lady, so to
Oh,
speak.
geez. Yeah.
But I have to imagine that was some of the intention starting the clinical supervision directory at some point or another. But yeah, I want to talk about this subject because it is so important for mental health practitioners to have good quality supervision, but more importantly, to have supervision that is also in alignment with who they are and that takes culture into consideration and just really has a different perspective on the way things are done. And I can tell some stories about some ugly slash non-helpful supervision situations, as we probably all can, especially those of us who may be in community mental health or have left community mental health. So can you tell us a little bit about where this journey starts and why this has become your passion?
Yeah, so we have a really we have a pretty big systemic issue in supervision and it's really I've kind of defined it as the gap. And it's been a gap for a really, really long time. And we all sort of acknowledge it. And I really, we talk about this in therapy all the time. And as therapists, I think it's funny that we've come to sort of tolerate this gap. And of course, we know as therapists that when you tolerate something, you're also endorsing it. So we've tolerated and then therefore endorsed this gap for decades, or at least for a very long time. And this gap exists, and that is that when you go from your graduate program or you're moving along your licensure journey, and you go from your graduate program into supervision, it's really difficult for a variety of reasons to find supervision. And not only to find supervision, but to find quality supervision that aligns with lots of different things and kind of checks the boxes. Like you mentioned, checks the cultural box, checks the diversity box, checks the gender box, checks the professional sort of alignment box, private practice, community mental health, social work, counseling, marriage and family therapy, EMDR, RPT, all of the alphabets, checks all those boxes, checks the geographic box, checks the handicap accessible office, checks the can I see you by teletherapy box, all of those different things. And again, because we tolerated this, we've therefore endorsed it. And, so a lot of us, I don't know about you, but a lot of us have, found our supervisors, by asking a friend of a friend of a friend, or, we talked to a colleague or a professor and we sort of got a recommendation, or we sort of were forced into our supervisory relationship by means of, our employer. And, that's really the way you either get forced off the highway in the middle of nowhere to the worst possible McDonald's because you have nowhere else to eat or go to the bathroom, or that's how you find a restaurant because, like that's who somebody recommended. Okay, so you got to eat, you've got to get supervision. So you go with what's easy. But it's not really always the healthiest or the best strategy for you to get your professional supervision. And so we're training, and I'm not saying that all of us are not quality and skilled because of this, but we're training our next generation of clinical supervisors in a way that is not necessarily aligned with best practice. And so therefore, I believe that if we want to up-level what we're providing for our communities, then we need to be saying that we want to up-level the strategy that we use for matching clinical supervision with the clinical supervision seekers. And because we have some fantastic, many, many, many hundreds of fantastic clinical supervisors. who just need to find the right fit. So that's what the clinical supervision directory does. It's kind of like the match.com of supervision, except we're not allowed to say that because, of course, we'd get sued and you're not supposed to date your supervisor. That's bad, bad, bad. And
So
that's
there's
the
no catfishing
there is
situations
no
going on.
catfishing, there is no Tinder for supervision, but the point is that there has to be a way to match that's better. During the pandemic, I just started realizing that no one was doing this, and none of our associations, NASW and ACA and AAMFT and OMCA, none of them were addressing the gap because again, we're tolerating it. We've endorsed it for decades. Why not just keep on letting the gap just exist? And I thought, I promise you, Patrick, I looked so hard. I looked so damn hard because I didn't want to do this. But I didn't. I really didn't. But I thought someone has to do this. Surely someone has done this. Someone has closed this gap already. And a few people in a few states have, but not nationwide.
Seems like a pretty enormous undertaking, especially when you say, I didn't want to do this. It sounds like almost like a passion, like a project out of necessity in a lot of ways is how it came about. Of like, I noticed that this is a need that we need to fill. And you're right, we are conditioned to think about supervision in one way or another. If we work for an agency, you see the agency supervisor, right? And when
Right.
I worked in community mental health, that supervision was free and included in your salary, and you were really excited. Yes, I'm going to get in house supervision. And then I would go to supervision and it would be an hour and a half long and there would be 20 people in there. And my supervisor was overworked and spread too thin and exhausted. And it was just a bitching session, so to speak, where people were just like airing their complaints or their grievances or their frustrations. And to me, I was just like, well, I'm not going back to supervision then because this is pointless for me. I mean, this is not helpful. And I think a lot of us have those experiences, but we endure it because we're like, well, this is what we have to do. This is what is required of us. And we're not really learning a whole lot in a setting like that when that is the structure of the supervision. And I know that's not everything. I know that every place doesn't operate that way. But I think for a lot of people, they do experience it and then they don't really get to ask the challenging questions. They don't really get to conceptualize around cases. They don't really get to work with supervisors who, like you said, maybe they look like them. Maybe they identify in a certain way. Maybe they practice in a certain style. It's more just like you get what you get, and this is all we have to offer. And I remember going to my program manager saying, like, hey, if you're going to keep me here and you want to keep me happy, then you're going to pay for external supervision because that's the only way I'm going to do this job for you. And they did, but they limited it to, we'll pay $30 an hour outside of this. And I couldn't find anybody. Nobody wanted to take that on. So I ended up paying out of pocket. And again, just one of those things that was a benefit at the time of working at an agency job no longer became a benefit. It actually became quite a deterrent and a detriment to me and my clinical pursuit of my license.
It's interesting too, so the challenge is great. The challenge is huge for supervision seekers. The challenge is equally huge for supervisors, as you're mentioning. So, I don't want to fault that supervisor who had the 20 people at your agency and really could only provide managerial supervision because they were stretched. They were probably an amazing clinical supervisor and just didn't have any option. And so, I meet a lot of clinical supervisors who say, well, I don't really need to be in your directory because I've already got 20 supervisees. And my argument back to them, and this has really kind of been an interesting journey for me. My argument back to them is no, you don't. You're right. You don't need to be in my directory, but you do. And here's why. Because you represent a demographic to the next generation that they need to see. They need to see what they are aspiring to clinically in order to know what they need to become. And so you can say in your directory listing, I'm not taking on supervisees, but this is the journey that I went through to become a community mental health clinician. This is my professional path. That's one of the things that's really critical is a lot of these, young people who are coming up don't even know how to get to where they need to get to. And so, that's another kind of part of this. And then there's the faculty element, the people at the universities, these, university supervisors, they say, well, I don't need to be in your directory either. I don't need supervisees, but they need to be in the directory too, because they, again, need to show the path to the next generation of how to get there. Someone said to me the other day, Amy, can you do a course on how to become a university professor? I'm like, no. Yeah, great idea. Like I am one, and I that's a great, I don't have time for that. However, put a university supervisor at that task. Let the next generation see that. So again, the clinical supervision directory again fills that gap, not only serving as a connection superhighway for supervision seekers and supervisors, but also as a mentor database to say, look at what you could become. Because you don't know when you're 23 years old, sitting in your university classroom, what you can become because you can't see it. And so until you can see it, until you can see that you are, a Korean American student who has, never been beyond Sacramento, and you can be such and so somewhere else, like you don't know what you can be until you can see it. And so, and we've heard that echoed now for the last 2 years more than ever before. And so that's really what is growing. And again, too, like putting experts in this as well, people who are experts at business growth, at documentation, at event planning, at other things in our field, group development, or, working with groups, or, suicidal ideation, people that are experts in play therapy and EMDR, those people, putting those people in this directory as a place to say, look, in our field, these are the people you're going to aspire to. That is us saying as a profession, look, here we are. This is how we want mental health to look. And if we want to say as a community of mental health clinicians that we believe mental health is this important, we have to elevate it as a profession ourselves. Because you know what? No one else is doing it for us, Patrick. It's not like Congress is out there saying, yay, rah, rah, you guys should make more money because you're so good at what you do.
That's very true. It's very well said. And I like this approach because it's so much more than just supervision. And, that's the point of this, right? Is like if you can show all of the different avenues of ways this career can kind of go, right? It allows people to know their options. It allows people to understand you don't just have to go to grad school, go into community mental health, work as a case manager. Like there are so many paths and there's so many exits off the highway, so to speak. And if we don't know those things, if we don't have good mentorship, if we don't know what is possible or what our opportunities could be, it's really easy to have that tunnel vision of like, I'm just driving down 95 and all I can see is that shitty McDonald's at the end of the road, 7 exits down, because ultimately I don't know any different. I don't know that I can go into career counseling. I don't know that I can be a college counselor. I don't know that I can, like you said, work with specific populations and specialize in specific people and struggle and issues. So it's really important to highlight that because I think our profession does a really good job of almost undervaluing what we do in terms of our understanding of what we offer and how we can bring those skills to the table.
Exactly. When we sponsored a table at the ACEs convention, which is the American Counselor, Educator, and Supervisors Conference, which is a division of the American Counseling Association. And that was back in October. And I did an interview with the current president, whose name is Kent Butler. And he said very, very clearly and emphatically that the most important value to him, core value to him, was mentorship. And I thought to myself, absolutely 100%. And I can't think of anything right now that is being developed on a national level by a clinician that speaks to mentorship more than this. And I thought, dude, you're sitting right next to it.
So and do you jump in and like shamelessly self-promote and
So
plug
yeah,
into that?
basically, I mean, it's funny because I'll just, tell you, Patrick, that so I live in Alexandria, Virginia, which happens to be the home of associations because right outside of DC, they can use a DC address. So ACA's office is 3 blocks from my private practice's office. So I actually do have a meeting with them next week, and fingers crossed, I'm really hoping that they see what a partnership with the Clinical Supervision Directory and ACA and other associations, that we can build a bridge, can do for our profession. Because I know that, I know that there are issues around this whole idea of, what needs to be important to our profession, getting clinicians into the field, trained by experienced professional supervisors in a seamless, efficient manner. I know that that keeps ACA up at night. I know that that keeps NASW up at night. I know that that keeps AMCA up at night and AAMFT. I know it does. It has to. It should keep all of us up at night because that's what we need to be doing to make sure that our communities are served.
Yeah. And probably more importantly now than ever, with everything that our profession has been supporting with and enduring over the last couple of years, the realization that clinician burnout is so high.
Yep.
If we don't have good mentorship, if we don't have good support, if we don't have sound supervision and guidance, it's really easy to say, fuck this, I'm going in a different direction. I'm not doing this anymore. I can't handle it. And for that burnout to just intensify day by day, sometimes hour by hour, to the point where I can't help the community. I can't even help myself. I can't even, get through the day functioning as a human being, let alone a mental health clinician. And I think that means the emphasis has to be really intentional then on having good, sound mentorship and supervision and guidance. And I think when we use the word supervision, it's great, but I think mentorship is so much more important in a lot of ways, to just say, we need someone to be guiding and mentoring newer clinicians in the field, newer therapists in the field, showing them the way and showing them that there doesn't have to just be one way to do it. I wanted to ask you a question about this because it comes up pretty often with the practice building and coaching that I do for newer clinicians who are coming out of grad school, who would say 99% of the supervisors I've reached out to about going into private practice have shot me down, saying that that's not something that they're willing to endorse. Do you have a lot of that in what you're creating? And what are your thoughts on that in general around newer clinicians going into group or private practice instead of the CMH route?
Well, gosh, I would actually say the complete opposite of that. I would absolutely say if you are entrepreneurial and you have some risk tolerance, then I think you should absolutely go into private practice. If you don't have risk tolerance, then you should maybe give yourself some time, because it's risky. And it's risky it's risky not in like you're gonna be homeless and eat peanut butter and jelly, but it's risky in that it can be scary when you put yourself out there and people don't necessarily know you, trust you, or like you yet. And so that takes time. In addition, it's interesting because I own the Clinical Supervision Directory, but I also own a private practice with 15 clinicians and 3 offices. And we've been open as a group practice for 10 years. I've been a clinician for 35 years or 30 years practically. I worked in schools for 20 years and so I've been along the journey for a long time, and I teach at a university and I do a lot of things in the field. And so I have these conversations all the time, and it took us a very long time to build our reputation. And there's still many times that people, still, don't know us or whatever, but it takes a lot to really have the backbone to know that, sometimes not everyone's going to like you. You're not going to have everybody right away, and you have to hustle, and you have to be willing to hustle, and you have to be willing to be vulnerable, and you have to be willing to be humble, and you have to be willing to take advice but community mental health can also be an incredible growth experience where you're going to get clients that you may never see in private practice. And so you may get some incredibly challenging cases and opportunities to work in teams with leadership that you may never get in private practice. So I think there's super pros and cons. I just think it depends on what the spirit you are, what the spirit you have to work, where that comes from. What moves you? Like, do you want to work for someone else, or do you really feel like you can do it on your own?
See, I like that response because it's very different than the response that so many people often get. You're saying basically check in with yourself and what drives you. You know, if you're risk adverse, if you want to work for yourself, sure, go ahead. That doesn't mean it's going to be an easy road. And I think most of my listeners would know I will never say that being an entrepreneur is an easy road. I think a lot of therapists get discouraged because the supervisors they reach out to when they tell them, "Hey, I am risk adverse. I do want to work for myself. I do want to have this autonomy. I don't want to go into community mental health." And the response is, "Well, then you won't be prepared to be a clinician if you go straight into private practice. You won't be clinically sound if you don't go into community mental health." And that's something that I hear very, very often from a lot of newer clinicians is that's the response that they've been given. So it doesn't sound like that's your perspective on that. Then it's more so about what do you want this career to kind of look like, ensuring that you know that there are risks to being an entrepreneur, absolutely. And that it's not always going to be an easy day, that's for sure. And there are a lot of bumps along the road, but having really good quality sound supervision and mentorship is crucial so that you can get through those bumps in the road as well.
Yeah, and I am never going to endorse anything that isn't ethical or that isn't legal in your state or isn't licensure bound, et cetera. And, one of the complications in this gap that we're talking about is how every state is so different. So, like, for example, in Virginia, I have a number of supervisees that work with me because I started my own private practice after I was licensed. Because in Virginia, you can't collect money and not be licensed. That's against the rules. And so, but lots of people try to figure out ways to loophole that. And it kind of is, in my mind, looks like laundering money, but whatever. I don't do that. But, like you do you, boo boo, but I don't do that. So lots of people come to me specifically because I'm not only a clinical supervisor, but I'm also a business person. And so I have that acumen. And my husband owns a toy store and we're very entrepreneurial in our family. And it's totally like cool with me. So when you go to the clinical supervision directory, you're looking for, does this person have like business experience? Or for example, you might look for, does this person work with the elderly? This is an area like elder care is an area that interests me. Or does this person work with children? Or does this person have like, for example, when we were at a conference display, doing a display, a sponsorship at a conference recently, a supervisee came up to us and said, I recently had to stop supervision and I haven't had a supervisor for 3 months because my supervisor kept misgendering me and I couldn't take it anymore, even though I had corrected them numerous times. That's not okay. And so, hello, what kind of profession are we in? And a lot of other things, what about supervision in different languages? And cultural humility and diversity, and there's so much missing in our sort of tapestry of what's available for supervision. And so putting them all in one, putting us all, not them, putting us all in one place allows for this just beautiful place, all one sort of one-stop shop, which we've never, Patrick, we have never had. Never
It's an
had.
incredible offering to just say, hey, filter out based upon A, B, C, and D, right?
Right.
And I imagine there's a finance filter too to figure out what people are charging for supervision too.
No,
Um,
good idea, but
no.
there isn't. But what you do is you put it in your bio. Like we're figuring all these things out. I mean, I'm trying to. 2022 is about being obsessed with the site. 2021 was about not dying, but it was about just trying to launch and getting people to know us. Now I'm just obsessed with the site. So we don't filter out the cost of supervision, but you can put your cost in your bio. But you can filter out almost all the other kinds of things. What are your areas of specialty? What are your areas of, where are your geographic regions? What are your what are your certifications? All kinds of different like areas. And you can text me, you can message us and say, hey, this is an area for me. Can you make this a filter? Absolutely. Sure. And the other thing people don't mention in terms of the entrepreneurial spirit, as a clinical supervisor, yes, you do charge for clinical supervision. It is a subset of your income stream and we all paid for it. I don't care what people want to tell you. It costs money to get supervised. It's the way it is. It's an income stream and teaching is too. So, we offer CEs in our in our site, and we pay faculty to teach from our site. So, these are all ways of continuing to grow as clinicians.
Yeah, definitely. I know that's a big point of contention is what do people charge for supervision? And in reality, there's going to be people who charge $50 for supervision. There's going to be people who charge several $100s for supervision. It really just depends. And I know there can be a lot of judgment thrown around about that in terms of accessibility, but I do believe that there are plenty of people who are doing what they want to do business wise because it is their time, it is their investment. Supervisors are invested in their supervisees and the outcomes. And there's liability there too and responsibility. So we have to take all of that into consideration. I know, for example, like I'll give a shout out to my clinical supervisor at my group practice, who's a very good friend of mine, Jennifer Garrett, is one of the best clinical supervisors I've ever been around, where I see her sending out articles and podcasts and checking in on her supervisees. And it's just completely different than the experience I got, where it was like, literally one time my supervisor fell asleep in supervision while somebody was talking
Oh
while
my
she
God.
was looking at the window. And, it's just you're sometimes you have to kind of try a couple of different supervisors out too to see what kind of style you kind of resonate with and what kind
Yes.
of approach you resonate with. Just like provider choice with therapy or doctors or anything else. I mean, we have
Yes.
supervisory choice too. So I think that's really important for anyone listening who is newer in the field to realize that you do not have to stay with the supervisor that you've been assigned or the supervisor you hired who isn't getting your pronouns right, who isn't culturally sensitive. You can fire them. You can move on.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly. And one of the things we want, Patrick, is like your clinical supervisor in your group practice, we want them in the directory. And then we want your group practice as a partner with and listed under their bio, because when your group practice, here's another entrepreneurial thing, because I can't stand it because I love it. Your group practice links to the CSD and the CSD links to your practice and it raises both of our SEOs. So that's another big deal is our website is national. We have gone from 000 Instagram followers to 2,500 in 6 months. That's not an easy task we're just three little people doing this. I mean, we're just regular old folks. We're not Amazon or Jeff Bezos or these big people out there doing massive things. We're just people that are trained as therapists. So it's we're hard workers, but we know how to do this, and we're getting it done. And so we can really, a high tide raises all ships, and that's really where we're focusing our energy is to elevate clinical supervision, elevate all of our work to say this is a huge priority, to say that this is what we take this really seriously. So when you've got an amazing clinical supervisor like that, you say you need to be in the directory. I'm going to pay for your directory listing, and because this is so important to us, and then our practice is going to be represented, and we're going to tell people we believe so much in clinical supervision that we made sure our people were represented in this.
Absolutely. It's a great point. It's a wonderful way to all build each other up to support one another's journeys and visions. So I think it's wonderful that, this is multifaceted. One thing I have a question about, because I know I've seen this a couple of times, including with myself. I had a clinical supervisor in community mental health who never wrote hours down. She got fired. All of the hours that I did then disappeared, prolonging how long it took me to get my clinical license. Do y'all have any tracking mechanisms within the supervision directory or anything to like help supervisees along those journeys so the stuff like that doesn't happen to anyone else?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. We certainly have a few tools, and that's part of what we're doing this year is adding to our toolkit. But we also are building some partnerships with some of those. There are a couple different tracking tools that are built online, and we're building some partnerships with those. So for example, like when you get a directory listing, you can purchase for your supervisees a membership with these different kinds of tracking tools. So I think that that's brilliant that you mentioned that, and I'm glad you brought that up because it puts it back on my radar as something that's a definite need. But there are some easy to use tools for that. But I'm glad you mentioned that as a reminder, because yeah, I think it's really important that everyone take responsibility for those kinds of things. It's certainly easy to forget. And I can't tell you how many people I know, their supervisor disappears and they lose their hours, or their supervisor disappears and they didn't get signed off on. And so all of those things are things we talk about. We send out a weekly newsletter so I really encourage anyone to just sign up for our information. And we try to put little tidbits and tips about supervision and what, just some things to just generally know about supervision and for supervisors and supervision seekers in that. And on our Instagram and our Facebook, our social media, we put all kinds of things like that to just say, hey, think about this, remember this. This is a good tip.
Very cool. I'm glad you're addressing that because you're right. I mean, supervisors disappear, they don't sign off on hours, they change jobs, they lose the paperwork, and all of a sudden, like the supervisor is left scrambling trying to figure out who's going to sign off on hours that maybe they didn't complete it under them, and I know some states still require paper charting. They don't have electronic portals like North Carolina's LCMHC board will only allow you to mail in your supervising logs and not there's no portal to upload those into. So it's just one of those wonky things, like you said, where state to state and even license type to license type, everyone is doing things differently. So it's really nice that you have everything under one roof. That sounds like a really fantastic offering. Yeah, I can tell how passionate you are. I mean, I've met you in person and I know you really love this stuff, even if it started as I don't want to do this, but now here you are. And it's like, I didn't want to do this, but it's happening and it's growing. And now it's either like, I've got to be all in or I've got to get the hell out of the way, right?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Like I said to my accountant, does this have to really be like an LLC? And she's like, and now I've mortgaged my house and here I am. So like, this is a big deal to me. I won't have ass anything. So I'm either all full ass or no ass. And so I'm full ass in it, Patrick. And here we are. I mean, it is a really big deal to me. And I actually wish someone else had done it. I mean, I wish, ACA had done it or NASW or someone else. And again, there are a few other people that have sort of done something similar-ish, but I don't think anyone has done it like this, nor as well, and or as comprehensively. And I think that we're really leading the pack. We're talking about it and we're getting out there and really walking the walk and talking the talk from supervisors to supervisors for across all mental health fields. So that's really the key.
Very well said. I love it. I love it. And I hope everyone that needs supervision or knows of a colleague who does or is just working in the field can really check this resource out and share it with people who would definitely be needing this, especially newer graduates and people coming into the field. That's going to be really important for them to know that they do have options and have choices and that their career doesn't have to be one directional. Amy, just tell us where we can find this information and how they can access it. And we're going to put this in the show notes for everyone that's listening as well. So you can go from it directly from the link as well.
Absolutely, I will. And Patrick, we need you in there as an expert in private practice building. So I'm going to send you a link to your own free directory listing as soon as we get off this phone call so that you can set that up because people need to find you as an expert in private practice building. So
Thank you.
That will be outstanding for people to be able to connect with you on that in the CSD. So look for Patrick there as well, but in North Carolina. So in the meantime, however, you can find us at clinicalsupervisiondirectory.com, which is the whole big long word, clinicalsupervisiondirectory.com. And we're also on Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn at Clinical Supervision Directory. So
very, very cool. We will have that in the show notes, clinicalsupervisiondirectory.com, and make sure that you check it out. Get your supervisor on that site, share it with people that you know, really ensuring that the next generation of mental health practitioners has guidance and mentorship and support, and really applauding the fact that the work that we do is really fucking hard. And we can only do that work if we have good mentorship and guidance and an ability to process things in a healthy way for not only us, but our supervisors as well. Want everyone to just write that down, check it out, make sure to share it. And for everyone listening, this is another episode of the All Things Private Practice podcast. You can listen to new episodes every Monday morning. Listen, download, like, subscribe, and share everywhere you listen to podcasts. If you want to find more of my information on coaching, retreat building, courses that are coming up, you can go to allthingspractice.com or join my Facebook group, All Things Private Practice, and we will see you next Monday.